Hello, Story Seekers. I'm Ben.
I'm Nico, and you're listening to The Tiny Bookcase.
Our guest for this episode joins us from Lancashire and writes both speculative fiction and short stories. When not writing, he develops gene therapies and runs half marathons.
His novel, Going Forth, is a fourth wall-breaking fairy tale farce which explores what happens when its protagonist, Brian, starts hearing an incredibly mean voice in his head. His attempts to get rid of it set him on an adventure through a fairy tale world he won't soon forget. We'd like to warmly welcome G.J. Dunn.
Hello, Gareth.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Very
Great
good,
to be
very
here.
good. So we've had a few people that we met at FantasyCon on the podcast recently, and we also met you there as well, and we had a lovely time.
Yeah. Do we want to tell a story about that, or we're leaving that off there?
It's. I think people are probably bored to death of us talking about FantasyCon at this point because we've talked about it so much. But it's just it's really nice to meet people in person, and I think we were talking a bit before we went on mic, but it's lovely to have a bit of a meeting the minds with people that are into the same stuff and also love storytelling. So
Definitely, yeah.
Speaking of meeting of the minds, so novel writing, that's one thing. Gene therapies, there is a gap in there.
Yeah, a little bit, I suppose.
How
Yeah.
do you straddle both of those, man?
So I suppose there is a crossover, a section right in the science fiction area. You do find as well that the old writing and reading community do cross over quite well into the scientist community, because a lot of us people who like to research and find out new things also love discovering new worlds in fantasy and sci-fi novels. So I think there is a bit more closeness than it might appear, but it's a fun area to explore when I'm not not really focusing much on it in the lab. Yeah,
I get you. Beyond researching, what's the main transferable skill, do you think?
I think you do get a lot of different communication styles in gene therapy, and it does lend itself well to the writing elements, and you have to use also a lot of creativity. So for a bit more context, I do research and development, so you do find you have to use quite a bit of creativity in finding novel solutions to the problems you have in the lab, and that also applies quite well to the writing. You get a lot of novel applying your brain very heavily to find solutions in your story plot.
Literal novel solutions.
Yeah. Not gonna lie, it sounds like you have a brilliant job. That sounds really fun.
I mean, I enjoy it quite well. Please remember that as you read the story. There may be some crossover, but I enjoy it very much. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think it is time to hit the stories. So the prompt for this episode is Mastermind, and Nico, you have the honor of going first.
The fear titillates me. I understand now why so many people have done this before me. The simple rush of knowing that what I do next could be embarrassing somehow adds to the unique piquancy of my situation. Fear isn't all of it, though. Anticipation, exhilaration. I didn't quite know how thoroughly having so many people watching would affect me. But here I find myself. I can feel beads of sweat forming on my shoulders and developing slow rivulets that cascade down my back. Perhaps it is instead the intense heat of the place. We are, after all, lit to be viewed. But I do not think that is it. I think it's the sense of peril I feel. You are safe, I tell myself. If you wanted to stop at any time, it's not like they could force you to keep going. You're going to be fine. But I stopped telling myself that, because in a way it takes away a degree of the excitement. I don't want guaranteed fineness. I want to feel like the world might disappear from beneath my feet and suck me into endless pitch. Oh, it's silly, I know. Who would want to feel as though their stomach was being yanked out through their feet? Who else might crave a wave of nausea that numbs and tingles in equal measure as it goes? Perhaps I'm mad. But I can't be. It's acceptable to be here. So many have done it. I've watched every video I could find online of it happening. I'm aware it's a little niche, but it's been going on a bloody long time, so there's plenty out there. Of course, everyone's slightly different. Some people are amazing, though. They go so fast, it's hard to believe they get as high as 12, 15 sometimes. I think I would faint. Will that me? Maybe I'll find out. Maybe they'll have to use smelling salts and bring me back from the brink of death. Perhaps I'm just being dramatic. I've been told off about that before, by less fun people, if I'm frank. So many people are vanilla and ordinary, willing to spend their lives taking no risk, just bumbling along like lemmings. For me, all about taking chances, even if you don't think you're qualified or meant for it. Be the master of your own destiny. Do things that scare you, like I am now. I like it. I watch the people adjusting the cameras. You don't see this part when you watch the videos yourself. I've practiced along with those videos so that the real meat of the situation I am prepared for. But the audience and the people with microphones and boxes of mystifying equipment are new to me. I watch lenses get changed and wonder if it's something to do with me. Perhaps I am wide, or some angle of me would look better fish-eyed. I don't ask. I behave myself and just wait patiently to be put into the chair. I've been staring at it for some time. I'll be the third of four to go into the chair today. They give it a cursory wipe down, but there's enough left there to make me giddy again. Imagine the history there. Imagine the bodies that have been pressed and crammed against its rich black leather. I stifle a squeal as I think about it. They probably wouldn't like anyone squealing. Everyone else around me silent, stoic. They had a girl on first and she was excellent, like a real pro. I hope I perform half as well as she did. Never heard applause like what she got. She went so deep. Thought we might have lost her. And then they say my name, and I'm up and moving, and then I feel leather on my skin. I let my fingernails gently dig into it. It smells of hundreds of people. Up close you can see the wear, the dirty secret that will be hidden by me, now that I've taken my place. I finally let myself look him in the eyes. They're blue and cool like winter pools. His face is kindly in spite of his stern demeanour. He is older than me, but that doesn't matter. He's been doing this for so long. I'm just honoured to be the next he probes. His broad Nordic features spread into a smile, and I shudder gently as he says my name. The waiting crowd applauds, and I am ready. I have to be. There's no turning back now. The room falls quiet, and when I think I can take no more, Magnus speaks. Your specialist subject is root vegetables of the British Isles. Begin. It is time. I come.
The longest setup to a shortest punchline I've ever heard.
Oh my days! Yeah.
Oh.
What a reveal!
What do you reckon, Gareth?
So yeah, I've got a few notes. First off, a fantastic effort. That reveal, the build up to the reveal, and the juxtaposition between the very creepy voice, the very kind of sensory build up detail, to then it be the mastermind chair was absolutely fantastic for me. Yeah. I had great first sentence, and that first paragraph, it did really draw you in. I was thinking, oh, what? There's quite common advice in short stories that is you've got to really grip in the first sort of 13 lines of your your manuscript. And to do that, quite often the advice is you want to introduce your kind of protagonists up front and your plot details. You didn't do that, and it still drew me in. So it's brilliant. I do think maybe you could pull back the reveal of the chair a little bit early, like build a few more hints in.
Okay.
A little bit earlier to pull the reader through. But other than that, I thought it was very fantastic. Very good voice from the character. Very good sensory detail involved, and what a reveal at the end.
Yeah, it's very, very good. I think I agree with all of that. I think that's really good feedback. I wrote down, this is either the Mastermind TV show played flat, or OnlyFans, or electroshock therapy televised.
It was in fact Magnus Magnuson's OnlyFans.
I was leaning that way myself as well. The more the televised like electrocution or something like that, we were leading to a chair. It was going to be bad. I think that's what worked so well with the voice and the switch.
It reminded me a little bit of, and I can't remember the name of the fucking episode, which is going to bother me. But have you guys watched Black Mirror?
Yes.
Yeah. There was a Black Mirror episode where they televised people's executions. And it was done in a kind of like, there's a studio and there's a live
White Horse, right? Is it White Horse?
That's ringing a bell for me, so I think you might be right.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah. So it was giving me like shades of that. So I think there was something in what you were doing that was building like horror tension and dramatic tension at the same time, which I really liked a lot. She went so deep I thought we might have lost her, however. Just sounds like a really big dildo is in play.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah, that was that moment was a hinge moment in the narrative. Could go one way or the other here.
It hinged on a floppy dildo. No, I like that a lot.
Over the hinge, do they? That's just it's asking for trouble.
How else are you going to pack it away for travel? Fantastic. Yeah, a lot of fun.
I mean, are we branching out into a new business idea here, or are we?
Yeah, I mean, I will happily profiteer off dildos. That's absolutely
merch.
Yeah, it just says "Story Seeker" in big letters all down the side of it.
You get sponsored by the app Hinge. That's the way to do it as well.
Oh my days! Hello, Story Seekers.
Oh, nice. What have you got any thoughts on it, Nico? After the fact,
I felt like I had to pull it out a bit. You know, like when you see people making old-fashioned sweets, and they're like, it starts as a blob, and then they pull it and pull it and pull it, and you think, this looks like it's not working, and it is literally 800 words.
So it's right.
The minimum we would ever write for this.
Yeah.
And because it's really only one joke, it still feels like it's almost too long. Like the concept isn't long enough for the format. But once I'd had the idea, I wanted to try and write it. I don't think I'd do one gag for a whole story ever again. I don't think I would try that again.
I mean, it is exactly on theme as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mastermind.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, no, I think
there's a lot about me that I thought of Mastermind, the TV show, and I thought, that big black leather chair they all sit in, that's definitely a shag chair, isn't it? I don't know if anyone wants to psychoanalyze that. Answers on the back of a postcard.
Oh, top notch. Top fucking notch. Nice work, man. Nice work. Right.
Whew.
Gareth, do you fancy it? Should we be calling you Gareth, or would you like to be exclusively as GJ Dunn the whole time?
No, Gareth is a lot better, I think. It's really, really personalises me as a human.
Well, if you're up for it...
We are still pretending you are.
Oh, yeah. I told we weren't going to talk about what happened at FantasyCon, man. That was
tentacles everywhere. When you're ready.
Oh, I might need a minute after that. All right, okay, here we go. Blame Culture by GJ Dunn. Grand Necromancer Saurathrax sat at the sarcophagus desk in his underground graveyard lair, watching the glowing fungus change hues. He took a deep breath, ignoring the blood that still coated the meeting room, and stretched a gnarled hand across the slab of marble, touching the tips of toughened fingernails to a scrying stone. "Send them in." The doors opened and 3 men entered, their footsteps echoing on flagstones. "Gentlemen," he said, "thank you for coming." Altex was the youngest. He'd turned to necromancy straight from his graduate degree, after realising that while heroism was virtuous, it couldn't quite match the pay grade of the nefarious deeds industry. Agarex, by contrast, was more experienced and displayed an honest passion for the profession that might see him go far if he could just control that confrontational streak. He had 1 or 2 grey hairs amongst the black, but he was still nowhere near as experienced as the last man, who'd once upon a time been Sarathrax's competitor for the Grand Necromancer job. At least, he had until Sarathrax had orchestrated that accident involving the undead hand and the pineapple during his interview. Not that Arch Necromancer Steve could know that, of course. Sarathrax blew out a low, steady breath. Now wasn't the time to get lost down memory lane. Instead, he slapped a big smile on his face and began. "I just wanted to start by reminding everyone that Necromantic Services Incorporated does not take part in blame culture. This meeting is to discuss lessons learned. We're not blaming anyone for what happened. We just want to know what we can improve on for next time." For some reason Sarathrax couldn't put his finger on. This didn't lighten the mood. "I don't want to say our plan was foolproof," he continued, "but we did lure Paladin the Paladin right into our trap, and he was captured and placed under guard. Clearly the fact he escaped means some mistakes were made. Wouldn't you agree?" The 3 men nodded, though Sarathrax wasn't sure if Altex was nodding or just nervously vibrating. "Good. Let's start with you then." Sarathrax pointed with his staff. "Altex, you were standing guard at the door that night. Can you tell us what happened?" "Yes, Grand Necromancer," Altex stammered. I was guarding the door after the captain had tied Paladin up, see?" He looked imploringly at the others for backup, but their gazes remained fixed on the other side of the room. "Then you came and said you'd take care of things and I should stay outside." Yes, Sarathrax said, waving an impatient hand. "After that he just came out with his sword free, cut down 3 of my best mates with a single stroke. If he could overpower you, Grand Necromancer, what chance did we stand?" Sarathrax snorted. "Paladin the Paladin? Overpower me? Never." But then how did he get free, sir?" Sarathrax stared at Altex like the idiot he was. "I untied his hands, of course." There was a moment of awestruck silence. "You untied his hands?" asked Steve. Sarathrax noted a hint of scepticism in his voice. "And I gave him back his sword." Steve's eyes widened. Sarathrax would have to be careful there. Necromancy was an ambitious arm of evil magics, after all. "I don't know why you're shocked. How do you think I'm supposed to monologue otherwise? Honestly, it's like you've never even worked in the evil industries before." "But you were still there, weren't you? You were still in the room?" asked Agarex. "Listen, I turned my back for 5 seconds, which, by the way, is an entirely appropriate amount of time during a decent monologue. If you lot guarding the door had done your damn..." Sarathrax cut himself off, the anger rising in his cheeks. This wasn't about blame, he reminded himself. This was an opportunity for his staff to learn from their mistakes. There was another beat of silence, into which Altex coughed. Sarathrax raised an eyebrow. "Yes?" It's just that, for next time, if you told me you were going to do that, I might have been a bit more prepared to..." Sarathrax raised his staff, and a flash of purple light filled the room. There was a hideous scream, and the light faded. Where Altex had sat, only a smoking chair remained. "What was that?" Agarex asked. "What was what?" Sarathrax replied, examining his fingernails. "You just pointed your staff at Altex and he disappeared." "He did?" "Yes, just look." Sarathrax stared at the chair as tendrils swirled in the air. He remarked. "Strange." The other 2 stared, aghast. "Now," continued Sarathrax, "after Paladin had made it past the... I suppose we can say it now Altex has run off to the dimension of eternal torment. Abysmal door guard. The path to the exit would have led him to you, Agarex, and your skeleton army." "The skeleton army that you insisted on providing the mana for, you mean?" Now, Agarex," Sarathrax said. "Remember, this isn't about blame. You just sent Altex to... Altex just needed 5 minutes to cool off. In the dimension of eternal torment, can you please explain what happened when Paladin approached your station?" Agarex's eyes flashed. As soon as he got within striking distance, the entire skeleton army disappeared in a flash of light. Sarathax tutted and shook his head. I expect more senior necromancers to keep better track of the armies they're provided with. From what I heard, the reason they disappeared was because you recalled them. Something about needing to swing a vote? Of course I recalled them, Sarathax said. They were going to make the staffs light up green when you cast magic. I just couldn't allow that. And I think all things considered, it was the right choice. The problem I see with the fact is the fact that we couldn't handle the situation with a bit more agility. You mean you think I should have planned not to have the 30 unkillable soldiers you'd given me? Agarex, the thing you need to understand about leadership is that you have to prepare for every eventuality. The thing you need to understand about fighting is it's a lot harder when you have 4 people instead of 34. Sarathax bit his tongue. Why was it none of the junior staff ever felt the need to step up? Why couldn't they just try and go above and beyond? And why did they have to be so aggressive? He raised a cautious finger. I understand you're frustrated, but you have to do a better job of controlling your anger. Agarex snarled, reaching into his pocket. I have had enough of this. Agarex's hand moved towards Sarathax in a flash of silvery light. Sarathax raised his staff once more, and purple light filled the room again. For sod's sake, Sarathax, Steve yelled. He was handing in his notice, not attacking you. Sarathax levelled a gaze at Steve, doing his best to ignore the thin sheet of paper wafting a slow path towards the floor. Steve, Sarathax said, summoning all the gravitas he could muster. Here was the meat of the matter. You were stationed at the door to prevent this very incident from occurring. How did Paladin escape? Steve tilted his head, considering for a moment. Well, he walked up to me with his sword still bloody from them young lads. I pointed to exit, told him to do as he pleased. The anger coursed through Sarathax's body like a spicy meal gone wrong. Here was the root of the problem. You betrayed me? You betrayed the company? Why? Ever since you've taken over, we've not managed to get one job right. And every time we fail, you organise one of these little meetings, and people end up going missing. And you will join them! Sarathax's anger reached boiling point. He raised his staff, and purple light filled the room. When it cleared, Steve still sat in his chair. See, said Steve, you're just a little bit predictable. It was easy enough to know where you'd have this meeting. Easy enough to know where you kept your staff. Easy enough to replace it with my own. Steve snapped his fingers and the staff flew from Sarathax's grip, clapping into Steve's hands with a mighty thwack. Fiery anger became icy fear in the space of a heartbeat. This is because of what happened at the Grand Necromancer interviews, isn't it? Sarathax whimpered. All these years and you still blame me. Blame? Steve shook his head. There's no blame here. The top of his staff lit up green, illuminating a savage smile. Just a lesson learned.
That's a really solid ending. That's a really, really solid ending to a very strong story. That tickled me throughout, man. There was I don't know what the jokes per minute was there, jokes per line, but it was high, and they were good as well. Really strong Pratchett energy, very strong Pratchett energy, which I appreciate.
Thank you. There's no bigger compliment.
I agree. Actually, there is no bigger compliment, and you earned it in that one, man. That was great fun.
Cheers.
I have to give a nod to Paladin the Paladin as a hilarious name. That is lovely stuff because it was fun every time he said it. I'm going to ask as well, when he said he turned around for 5 seconds, was that a Dungeons and Dragons reference by any chance?
It was not. No, honestly, this story came about as a combination of the Austin Powers scene where Dr. Evil locks Austin Powers in a room full of lava and then just leaves him there, and some tedious meetings I've been a part of in my various different roles in during my career. Obviously, not my current role.
Obviously. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I liked it a lot. I thought it was really good. Have you played the game Tactical Breach Wizards?
I have not either. No, I'm a little. We'll probably discuss it later, but I'm a little slow to embrace the nerddom that's been beating in my heart for my entire life, to be honest. So I've not. Yeah.
No, it's just that there's a character called Steve Clark in that is a traffic warlock. and so Steve, your Steve the Necromancer was giving me strong Steve the Traffic Warlock energy, which was
it's one of my favorite comedic beats. Is a very boring and plain name where there really shouldn't be one. I've had one of my recent short stories was it's published in Dragon's Horde 3, and it's about a dragon called Keith.
Keith is a great name for that. That's really funny.
Is it? It might actually be a Pratchettism talking about how swords with one-word names are way scarier than swords with really long titles. Well, that might not be him, but it gives me that same energy.
I think that the whole thing felt like you had absorbed a lot of Pratchett, and then you found a way to put your own spin on it, which because to say it had strong Pratchett energy doesn't mean you were just like copying Pratchett. This felt like you and your voice, and that's why it worked for me. But I do agree that there were lots of it tickled me in the same way that his stuff tickled me.
Thank you. That's a really big compliment.
Yeah. I had a note which was so I get that the structure of the story is such, and I really like the ending. Right, there was something about when he said that he sent the first guy into the dimension of eternal torment for 5 minutes to cool off. It felt like there was potentially a joke on the ground there that could have been picked up, which was for him to come back in 5 minutes and we see him as a completely different man, having spent 5 minutes thinking that it was an eternity.
Spent 5 eternities.
Yeah. I did consider that. There's a few bits that I had to pull out. At one stage, Sarathrax did have a bone cat that he was stroking on his lap, but we're at 1475 words, and I didn't want to be the author that came in over word count. That would be.
We appreciate that. Yeah, that's my job. Yeah. I just that how am I supposed to monologue otherwise? I think that was the first time that I sort of like was not fully in, but where I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna have a really good time for the rest of this story. Needing to swing a vote by recalling the skeletons, that made me feel
Yeah, I did write down they were going to make stuffs light up green. How you delivered the line was fantastic.
So the delivery was something that I was going to talk about. Your voice for Sarathrax was great, and all of the three supporting casts were also really individually voiced as well. And not only were they individually voiced, they were characterized really well, very quickly. So you were talking about for Nico's story how when you introduce things, the idea is to get it done quite quickly in a short story, and you introduced 4 characters very quickly, and they all felt different, and they continue to feel different and distinct throughout the story.
Yeah, I think that's one interesting thing for me in the because obviously I've never done sort of live reading before. Mostly it's been on paper. Is going back through and just having a few. No. Mostly what just happened was me trying to make the characters distinct, even with a bad Yorkshire accent. But I think, translating from page to spoken word can really elevate things, especially when you get someone like Nico who can do whatever accent. And it's something I found listening to the podcast, to be honest, is you guys really elevate your work by reading it aloud. So it was, I'm not going to say I practiced, but I practiced.
Yeah, that's fine. If that's your first time live reading, that was extremely good. Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But I think it was backed up by the writing. Sometimes I know I've done it. Giving a performance can sometimes elevate it beyond potentially what's in the work, in the story. That isn't the case here. They were. I could hear that it was the right words, and then you said them in the right way, which is a double talent. So nice work.
Yeah, I think it can be the case that because it's a slightly different format, really, because you're writing when you write to the prompt for the podcast, you're writing to be read aloud.
Yes, it's slightly different.
You can end up writing something that feels more like a play than I know I'm terrible for writing, internal monologue or dialogue that is very theatrical. But that felt like you had written a great short story and then realised you needed to read it out as well, so you just read it well. Like you didn't use the crutch of knowing that you got to get away with certain things that you can in an audio format. So yeah, I think it would stand on its own without the read.
Thank you.
I think you can tell that we liked it. I do have 2 more bits to make you blush before we get on with me having to tell a story. The first one, just a little one, was that I really liked the line. Couldn't tell if he was nodding or just nervously vibrating. There was now that's a really simple line, and I couldn't tell you why that tickled me so much, but it was just a really nice turn of phrase, and it just worked for me really well. So that was I thank you for that. And then finally the build up to the ending with Steve. I don't know if we've ever spoken about it on the podcast, but recently Nico and I have started rewatching all the Bond movies. And we have bonded a little bit on our enjoyment of the Daniel Craig Bond, and
you bonded over Bond.
We bonded over Bond. Yeah,
We took part in some bondage. Yeah,
it's extreme bondage. But one of the bits that we discussed that we liked so much was that when they reintroduced Bond with Daniel Craig in the first movie that he's in, which is Casino Royale, in that first sequence where you sort of find out who he is, he has the "I know where you keep your gun" line. And it's just it harkens back to how Bond is actually just like a calculating psychopathic assassin. And you got that energy into Steve with like, I know where you keep your stuff, I know where you were going to have the meeting, and it gave me a good chill for that character. Like I was like, ooh, he's ice cold. I was really in for him. So yeah, that was I don't know if that was a deliberate reference, but for me, I was like, oh, that's a really cool way to have that character turn that. So nice one.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing yours now. Yeah.
Yeah, more time for more turns of phrase, Ben, and the phrases shall be yours, and you shall turn them.
Mastermind. Lachlan's father, the mighty Duke Douglas of Ulster, taught him to fish when he was no taller than an apple tree. They'd leapt from the causeway together into the bone-chilling ocean, wearing nothing but the red hair on their heads. Lachlan had known the smaller fish were no sport, and had instead hauled a dolphin up on his third dive, much to the delight of the Duke. "You'll do for me, laddie!" The warm words and the echoing backslap it had earned him still brought a smile to Lachlan's face. That was tainted now, of course. He'd awoken a week ago to the news that his father had collapsed whilst heaving a caught whale up onto the basalt bridge that connected Alba and Eire. His ducal entourage of humans had been unable to get him out of the water, and instead had lashed him to the rocks until one of their giant betters came to fetch him. Lachlan had imagined him bobbing with the waves, bumping into the columns of the causeway. Fear had filled him that those creatures his father had loved to hunt beneath the surface might take the opportunity to nibble him until there was nothing left to bury. He hadn't wanted to see the corpse when they brought it back, on a dozen creaking wagons. His sleep had been plagued ever since with the same nightmare of being trapped in the burial mound with the old Duke. In the dream, he lacked the strength to move the boulder door and had to watch as water seeped from his father's fish-bitten body to fill the chamber and drown him. "My Duke." The noise was small, coming as it did from the tiny throat of one of his human courtiers, waiting in the audience chamber of Sperrin Castle. "What?" Lachlan rumbled, clenching his fists against the urge to splash the man across the flagstones. Enormous slits in the walls let in angled sheets of bright winter light, and he saw the little human, who was holding something close to his chest, shiver against the cold of the cavernous chamber. Lachlan's whaleskin leather tunic and trews kept off the meagre chill, and it was not yet deep enough into winter to wear the fur cloak the king had gifted him the previous year. That fur was a thing of beauty. 20 bears had died for it, and their brown and bone-coloured hides were a warm reminder of his friendship with the Donian king of Alba and Eire. Beyond the fur-draped ducal throne, there was little else adorning the chamber, other than his father's claymore, which hung on the wall behind it. "There has been a message from the Duke of Connaught, your grace." "Speak it." "It is sealed, your grace." Lachlan leant forwards and plucked the item carefully from the outstretched small hands. It was a human skull, boiled clean and bound in its own tanned face. Its eye, mouth, and nose holes were sealed with blue wax, the colour of Connaught's banner. Lachlan knew of dead men's messages. They were only sent when the cost of a human's short life weighed little against the dire and private message they contained. He tore the top off the skull. As he did so, the face underneath pulled taut, and the wax seals cracked. "May I go, your grace?" "Wait there. I may need to reply." Lachlan unrolled the message and squinted to read the small writing. To the Duke of Ulster. My condolences for the loss of your father. He was a leader to us in these trying times, as I'm sure you will be in his place. I want to assure you that the plans he began are still in motion, and we shall see them through as agreed before the new moon. Your servant, Duke Fergus of Connaught. Lachlan rubbed his tired eyes and read it again. He mouthed the shape of the words and shook his head from side to confused side. "Human," snapped Lachlan, making the scared little man jump. "When is the new moon?" Tonight, your grace." "Did my father have many such messages from Connaught? Speak!" "He did, your grace, and sent many in reply. Not just to Connaught, but the Dukes of Leinster and Munster as well, and their vassals." Lachlan stood up from his father's chair quickly and stalked across the chamber to peer out of the nearest south-facing slit window. The sudden move startled the humans in the chamber, and they scattered away from him. A barnyard stench rose from them, and he snuffed it in, savouring their fear. "Is the king abroad?" he asked the chamber. "He is hunting, your grace. The land shakes with it." "The elk will lead him here. They always do." He rode the bumps of the distant horizon with his eyes, and winced when he saw a shape he recognised. As he watched, it grew slightly larger. A royal hunting party in the lowlands. The king loved to hunt, and loved to visit Lachlan. His father had known that. The blood in his broad veins ran cold. He thought he'd known his father, but had that person ever really existed? Who had he truly been to plan such a thing against a fellow giant? Not least, their king. Lachlan strode back to his father's chair and took down the claymore which hung behind it. A broad band of stitched dolphin leather was attached to either end of its scabbard, and he slung it over his back as he made haste from the chamber. His breath made clouds in the air as he looked down from the motte his father's keep had been built upon. Below it, the bailey which housed his humans hummed with life. "They breed like rabbits," the old duke had told him once, "and work like ants." Lachlan pounded down the steep motte his ancestors had raised to subjugate the little people, and stepped over the palisade the humans had built to protect themselves from their own kind. His legs stretched and his stride elongated as he got up to a run. He bounded through the hillocks of burial mounds on which ash trees had rooted, and heard the thunder of his running feet bounce around the world. River-cut valleys, small mountains, broad moors. He sprinted through them all, taking enormous strides and ducking low as winter clouds threatened to drench him with snow. Ahead of him, the royal hunting party flushed their game with humans and threw spears thick as battering rams after them. The elk, far larger than their cousins found in Alba, had been the preserved game of royalty for 10 generations. King Rory Benandonna, descendant of the Red Man himself, beamed with delight when he saw Lachlan skid to a halt, rucking up an acre of arable land in the process. "Lach, I had thought to stop by Sperrin this evening to see your face." The king, his belly rounded by the luxury he lived in, flung himself down on a nearby hillside, smothering a small village as he reclined. "I heard your father passed. What a duke! The best of them, so he was. Clever and wise." "What's this about, Lachlan?" The Duke of Connaught stepped out of the retinue. The elderly giant was still the tallest of his brethren, though age was rounding his back like a bowstring bends a tree's heartwood. Lachlan saw his boulder-like knuckles were white where he gripped his hunting spear. "I request the king's presence," panted Lachlan, "at my father's wake." The old giant looked confused by his words, but the young king leapt up, giddy with anticipation. "There's to be drink?" he asked, smiling. Building debris slid from the backside of his expensive loom-woven tunic, and Lachlan noticed the human viscera smeared across him. "I don't think so." The Duke of Connaught started forwards, spear aimed at the king's heart, but Lachlan had been ready and ripped the claymore from its sheath. 40 feet of hammered iron sang as it swept the head from those old bent shoulders. It bounced twice, denting the land both times, before coming to rest in the centre of a small lake. Connaught's tongue lolled into the befouled water, as though decapitation had made him thirsty. "There!" growled Lachlan at the gawping giants of the king's retinue. "Let that be the end of it!"
Wow.
Giants are so fucking cool, man. Oh, you got
Right.
this. You got so much really good stuff about scale in there. Like the something you did a lot of, right, was using animals that are
Mm.
like, to us would be big animals. Like you had stitched dolphin leather, which is an incredibly satisfying group of words on it, by the way.
Yeah.
And talking about how 20 bears had died for his cloak, and it just it gave a sense of scale, but then they kept they felt so big, like talking about ducking under clouds, and it was really cool. Like as soon as
Yeah.
you'd given the causeway reveal and we knew it was giants, I was like, oh yeah, they're gonna do cool giant shit. But then have it just be like a cool medieval politicking, but on a scale where when the king sits down, he kills a bunch of people. Yeah, it ticks a lot of boxes for me personally.
See, I also came at it from the other side of the thing. One of the things I found that was really kind of empathizing is the opening line around the memories of his father as a child. What was it? Jumping into the river with nothing but the red hair on their heads. Those little moments where it really humanizes something that is not human. It was done really well, I thought.
Thank you.
The nightmare about being in the tomb was good as well. That was nice, and it's really hard to like someone explains their dream and you're always like and they're talking as though it is the most exciting narrative they could possibly weave, and you're going and he was wearing only one slipper. Yeah, that's good. But you got that kind of cinematic nightmare vibe very well, and with good word economy. Like you didn't need to explain he was trapped in the tomb. You were just like he was in the tomb. It was filling with water. It was, and that was like we got enough to really set that moment in stone. That was a particularly strong moment for me.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, one of the things so obviously I listen to the podcast as well, and one of the things that I always really enjoy is when Ben breaks out his story and just really listening and enjoying the prose on it, and that's really been to my detriment in trying to provide feedback, because all I've got here is a list of really quotes that I've really enjoyed, like the land shakes with it and the thunder of his running feet bounce around the world, and nibble him until there was nothing left to bury. Those little moments that evoke so much with so few words, that I've kind of forgotten to get some feedback on the overall plot of the thing.
It's okay. I mean, that's an enormous compliment. So thank you very much. I think there potentially is room for improvement on that story. I think it does something, and I sort of did it deliberately, and I'm interested to maybe workshop it a bit with you guys. But it comes to a very abrupt end.
Yes.
And what I was trying to do there is when you read myths and stuff, they do just sort of end.
Yeah.
Like
That is true. Yeah.
the big thing happens, and then they just sort of end. And I had it that he just cut his head off, and then I just stopped. I was like, I think this is the end, but it's sort of not the end from a modern storytelling perspective or a short story perspective. So I sort of added a line. I did add a line where he sort of he verbally gives the cue that the story is over. Um, but I'm not entirely sure it landed. So I'd be interested to hear what you guys think about the ending.
Do you think that was influenced, that last line, by us currently consuming James Bond movies?
I don't know.
Like, he often drops those lines afterwards, and very often they're actually just not funny.
Oh
I think
yeah,
they're intended to be.
yeah. Oh
But
yeah, it's especially in the earlier ones where he just sort of like he almost gives a little wink to camera, and you're like, dude, man, you just killed someone. Have some fucking respect for the dead.
I,
he'll shoot someone directly in the face and then be like, "I guess you wasn't having a second course," and then leaves, and you're like,
yeah,
what are you even referring to, James?"
yeah,
But they like I think there's a very metatextual joke there of you saying, "Let that be the end of it," and then it being the end of the story. Like that, I actually think that kind of works. Like, and then that is the end of it. I'm like, what? Hang the fuck on. But yeah, I get what you mean. Because you're going for that mythological feel, where at the end you're meant to just assume that they then return to business as it was, because it's not pertinent to this exact myth.
yeah. Or they all kill him, or they kill him for killing Canorse and kill the king anyway, and you know it does sort of leave it that it could go either which way potentially.
Yeah.
But
that, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think, in terms of a short story, one of my favorite, I suppose, analogies in the difference between a short story and a novel length work comes from Mary Robinette Kowal. She compares the novel to she compares the writing to the Olympics, and she compares the novel to kind of, you see the person start their training, they go through all the training, they finally reach the Olympics, they do their trick, and then you see them land the trick, and then you see them celebrate with their family. They get that denouement, and you get to see them have that success. Whereas a short story, by comparison, is the highlight reel that you see on the news. You see the person, they run up to the pommel horse, they do their flip, they land the flip, do the arms up in the air celebration, and then they're done and you're out. And you've got that really strong emotional hit in the short story that sometimes you don't have with the novel. And that is, it could be a strength of the format. And I think, for me, the ending you had worked quite well. There are things that can happen after. It's up to you as the author to define. You could even end it on a beat where the enemies kind of, or they grip their swords tighter, and you think, something more is going to go down, but it's going to happen off screen. It's not a bad thing, I think, to leave it as an open-ended thing. I did personally like the let that be the end of it and then just drift off into silence. You may have noticed by the long silence that stretched after it. It hit me quite impactfully, I think. So I quite liked it.
Okay, all right. I think those are interesting takes. Go on, Nico. Sorry.
Especially with it being a myth, like a lot of folklore and folk tales do end with and that's why your shoes have 3 buckles on them.
Yeah.
So I think avoiding something like that, because it would be quite easy to say, and that is where the isle in the lake came from. I think
yes.
it would lose some quality. That you could, theoretically, you could do a because he's looking to end conflict, would say, but remember, you don't see many giants now, because that does give an illusion that they definitely kept fighting and killing each other, but I don't think it actually needs it.
Also, this is almost like a what if for an alternate, apart from the. So, are you aware of the story of the Finn McCool or whatever it is, where the story about the Giant's Causeway actually occurs and what happens to it?
Yeah.
No. Right, okay. So I'll just tell it very, very briefly. But basically, there's a big guy in Ireland, big hero guy. He's sort of a giant, sort of not a giant. And one day he's in Northern Ireland and he looks across to Scotland and he sees some big fucker over there. And they start like exchanging rude gestures and like swearing at each other and shouting insults and shit like that. Finn McCool decides that he's not having any of this shit. and builds the Giant's Causeway over to Scotland. As he gets closer and closer and closer, he realizes that this Scottish giant is fucking massive, way bigger than he is.
Is this
And
is this a direct text from the
yeah, no,
myth?
this is actually
Okay,
translated from the original ancient Gaelic. Yeah, sees this big giant and it sort of bottles it basically, and stops, and then runs back across the causeway home. He's panicking and he says to his wife, "I've just pissed off the biggest guy ever. This is a real problem. I'm going to dress up as a baby, and you have to tell him that I'm your baby, and that his father's away hunting. Do that, right?" So I think she's called Una, by the way, just not to lose her name to history, or myth or whatever. Anyway, so then this big fucking giant comes over from Scotland, and he's called Benandonna, which means like Thunder Mountain or something in ancient Gaelic, right? He's also nicknamed the Red Man because he's covered in like red hair and wears a kilt and stuff. Anyway, and he points at this woman and her baby and says, "You know, where's Finn McCool? Where's that bastard? He's been yelling all sorts of shit over the ocean at me. And I've used this causeway to get over here." And Una says, "This is our baby. He's out hunting." So he sort of looks at the baby and he sees that this baby is massive. And he's like, "Well, hang on a sec. If this baby's massive, then the father's going to be even bigger than I am." So he bottles it and then fucks off back to Scotland. And then I forget what happens, but somewhere in there they break the causeway, which is why there's a bit in Ireland, and then there's also a cave in Scotland called Fingal Cave.
He throws the stones aside when he's going back. So
is that it?
Taste, yeah.
Yeah, he kind of like takes it up as he goes, doesn't he? Yeah. So this is an alternate, like, what if take on that, which is, what if that big Benandonna bloke didn't have any of that shit and just killed the baby, killed the mother, and wait for the guy to get home, but he never came home. So he just became the king of Scotland and Ireland. And then, essentially, what if the giants were like the Normans in England and they just took over and they had the humans as their serfs? So it's not... I was never trying to tie it into, like, our mythology and our history in terms of how it ended, if that makes sense. It was supposed to be like a what if it were otherwise.
I do often ask you this, Ben. Was this based on a true historical event?
Well, I think, to be honest, like this story actually started. This was originally two different stories, and it was originally going to be a story about Normans and how, what if your father was like a genius mastermind of subtle plots, and then he died, and then you inherited his title and his plots, and all of a sudden you're having to deal with that. And then I had this giant idea, and it all got mixed up in a pot together, and this is what came out. So
I'm glad it did.
Yeah,
beautiful story.
So go on.
I feel I've been roundly spoiled by you two this episode. I wrote a silly joke about a sex chair, and then you two turned up with actual stories. So thank you ever so much. Although the connection for all three, every single one had an important chair moment in it. So
that's true. Excellent. There's always
we think of chairs.
Always look for the connections.
Just before we move on and head into the interviews, I think it's important that we just have a little bit of a chat about your book and stuff. Like, would you like to give people a bit of a rundown on Going Forth?
Yeah, awesome. So Going Forth is as you mentioned at the top of the table, a fairy tale, fourth wall breaking farce. The heart of Terry Pratchett meets the absurdity of Monty Python. It's fantastic. There we go.
I'm into it. That's fine.
No. If you liked the story that I've just read out on you will probably like the novel. I would encourage everyone to go onto the Amazon page at least to check out the artwork, because the cover artist has done the most fantastic job, which is even better of a job when you consider the actual concept artwork that I sent to him, which was full of stickman drawings. Have a read of the sample. If you like the sample, you'll probably like the novel. I had great fun writing it. Hopefully the description on the page does it justice. It was written back in 2018 now, and it's kind of been a long journey to get it to publication ready. And it's out there. Go read it if you like. It's on Kindle Unlimited.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And where can people sort of follow you, get your news, that sort of thing?
So the best place is if you go onto Google. You can go onto Google and you can go onto GJ Dunn. It's in the search bar. Type that in. Ignore the milkman. The milkman is not me. Yeah.
Not a milkman.
You'll probably find the website, which is gjdunn.co.uk. You can find me on Amazon, on Facebook, on Instagram at Ridicufiction. Although I am very bad at actually putting anything on social media because I enjoy writing. And that generally makes me forget about the whole social media side of things.
It is also just straight up just a consistent dumpster fire and has been for a long time, hasn't it? Like social media generally.
Sorry, is this social media or is this going forth? Because
absolutely not going forth.
Oh, okay, okay.
It is me supporting you in writing more things like going forth rather than wasting your time on social media.
It's a hard thing especially when you want to write and you're not a natural. I'm not naturally outgoing on the internet because I enjoy doing my own thing on my own life, and it's a point where I have to sit down and go, right, I will write a post today, and yeah, like you say, it's a bit of a dumpster fire. I see a lot of adverts on there, and a lot of unfact checked news stories.
Yeah,
that's all right. I've got the perfect solution. I'll just ring you each night, and you can tell me what you're having for your tea, and you won't need to be on social media. Perfect.
Job's done. We've got the new way of working.
Right. Join us in the next episode where we're going to be interviewing GJ Dunn, aka Gareth, our mate from FantasyCon that we've just told some wonderful stories with. And we'll see you next week.
See you then.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?